Well, as a minister, I've spent many times worrying about Easter Sunday, and I confess that sometimes as a minister, particularly back 30 years ago, it's like, how in the world am I going to convince people of this wild and crazy story that even leaves those who are part of the Easter story quite puzzled and perplexed and running with fear? Depends on the version that you read, but at the end of the day, this is quite the story. So I wanted to have a little fun, and I did a little research, and I wanted to share with you that there's actually a website that's dedicated to 6 words. Actually goes back to 2006. Website that Larry Smith founded, and these are 6 last words that you would like to leave, not necessarily as an epitaph, but perhaps before you die, the last 6 words. And it's spawned now, like hundreds of thousands of people have placed some last 6 words in. And so here's a few examples that I like. Here's the first one. Not quite what I was planning. Here's one for Easter. Timing is everything. Eggs know this. Here's a real fun one. I still make coffee for 2, writes someone after breaking up with their partner. Stephen Colbert, a funny man, I enjoy him so dearly. One of my favorites says, well, I thought it was funny. Screenwriter Nora Ephron, she's got the classic. Secret of life, marry an Italian. Well, friends, for all the joys, fanfare of Easter and the complexities and mysteries, I always think back to my professor of actually Old Testament at University of Toronto, and I forget who he quoted, but one of my favorite quotes, he always, I don't think it was Dostoevsky, but he loved Dostoevsky, but he would quote, life is not a problem to be solved, but it's a mystery to be loved. And the mystery of this resurrection is that this is a resurrection for everyone. And if you actually want to look at 6 words that changed everything, from all the billions of words that have been written about Christianity, the words in the Bible, Jesus is risen from the dead, has changed everything. These are words that martyrs have sang before burned at the stake or fed to the lions. These are words that Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German martyr opposing Nazism, forced in seclusion, taught his students in secret seminary. These are the words Oscar Romero was speaking as he was gunned down while celebrating the Eucharist in El Salvador. These are the words of Martin Luther King Jr. he held fast to as he opposed the violent racism of culture. The words that have inspired Desmond Tutu's work in South Africa. These are the words that Mother Teresa admitted she had lost meaning for at the end of her ministry. Yet, she so believed in these words that she never abandoned her work with the poor. Jesus is risen from the dead. These are the words that faithful people in Sri Lanka, they are saying now over 207 killed on Easter celebration from the horrors of a bomb and the horrors of hate and violence. Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. These are the words that say that death does not have the last word. C.S. Lewis once said, I believe in Christianity as I believe in the sun that is risen. Not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. My friends, Richard Rohr, some of us follow his daily writings, get a daily email. He's a global ecumenical teacher, founded in Catholicism, but is really grounded in mysticism. He practices self-emptying of compassion for the marginalized. I think he's one of the most inspiring followers of Christ. I think he's impacting millions of people. In his most recent book, I ordered back in November, it just came out, I think, March, The Universal Christ, has really inspired me for today's message. Easter is for everyone. And Richard, he points to Paul, and how Paul, like you and me here today, never had a literal experience of the resurrection in the sense of he didn't know Jesus physically, but he had a spiritual conversion on the road to Damascus that changed everything. Richard reminds us that resurrection means change. And I quote from 1 Corinthians 15:13, "If there is no resurrection from death, Christ himself cannot have been raised." Let me say that again. If there is no resurrection from death, Christ himself cannot have been raised. Richard Rohr says, Paul declares to all of us this universal Christ. The world is christened. In the beginning, God created the world, and it was good. Richard has a great gift to recognize that science is a great teacher. And science teaches us that 98% of our body are atoms. They're replaced every year. Geologists with good evidence over millennia can prove that every landscape is changing. Nothing is permanent. Resurrection is another word for change. Everything is changing. Science is now giving us a very helpful language that religion, as Rohr says, has been trying to say through mythological language for centuries. And remember, as he says, myth doesn't mean it's not true. In fact, myth means that it's always true. So as we face this mystery, the unexplainable, Paul says one more thing that I'd like to offer for you today. And he says in the 15th chapter of 1 Corinthians, I'm telling you something. It's been a secret. We are not all going to die, but we are all, I underscore all, going to change. That means not only is this resurrection about humanity, it's about all of creation. Yeah, even my dog Jasper is a part of the resurrection. And your dog and your cat, all of creation. No wonder we should be called and challenged to care about all of creation. So I want to close with this. Carol Houselander, she's a mystic that I was telling Galen about this story. And Galen, you don't mind me saying that as I told this story, I'm going to tell it to you now, Galen shook her head and said, that makes a lot of sense from my own personal experience. And I believe it in my whole heart. So Carol, she was in the underground train in London, England. I've had the pleasure to be there, and the British people are some of the most funny people I've ever met on that tube there. They just, I think they know us Canadians coming when I look lost like a Canadian, and they had a lot of fun with me as I was figuring my way out in the tube. But this beautiful woman, she was just getting on that train like every day and hustle bustled into the day. Workers all squeezed into that train. Everybody from every walk of life as she looked at all different cultures. And quite suddenly, Carol says she had the most vivid experience of her lifetime that had changed her life forever. And all of a sudden, as she looked around the train at every person she could see, she saw Christ in every single one of them. There wasn't one person that did not have the face of Christ on them. And she says as she looked at them, she saw their sorrow, she saw their struggles, she saw their pain, but she also saw their hope. She saw their love. She saw Christ. Now, she says she went up the steps of the train station, came up in the streets of London, and she was surprised. She could still see Christ everywhere she looked. She looked at people and she could see Christ in people. People that at one time, probably I know myself, probably judged by the clothes they were wearing or how they looked, or she saw Christ in everyone. Now she says, after a few days and weeks, it did start to fade and kind of return to everyday life. She had to work a little harder to realize that Christ was in everybody. But she said that moment changed her life forever. Richard Rohr hears her story, and in this mystic, Richard Rohr says this: the universal truth about the resurrection of Christ for everyone is that this is not a native Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, Islamic, or Christian kind of love. This is a love for everyone. There's not just a Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic, Orthodox way of running a soup kitchen. There's not a gay or straight way of being faithful. There's not a black or a white way of hoping. There is a positive flow of love for everyone. And we all know what coldness is about. We all know what judgment feels like. We all know what labels can do to us. The resurrection is for everyone because we are all truly loved. I heard that resurrection story in Jordan's swimming and her championship race. I was reading yesterday in the Star, an 81-year-old Ron Robert facing the battle of his life with Alzheimer's. Ron says in this article, he worked with Pierre Trudeau. He was helping Pierre Trudeau in those political days. And now at 81 years of age, he's at King's College and University of Western, and he's studying political science. He goes, I'm actually studying Trudeau now. I actually worked with him. And he's doing all of this with the reality of facing Alzheimer's. But there's something in Ron Roberts' spirit that's abundantly clear. He believes in himself, and he believes that there still is a deep purpose for him. I think that's what the resurrection is all about for each and every one of us. It is mysterious, but it is incredibly, incredibly positive. And so the challenge I send myself and all of us here, Worsham here today on this Easter, whether you're off to a big turkey ham dinner or you had it yesterday, as you prepare to depart from this sanctuary, do you believe that you are an Easter person? Part of the resurrection. Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, and it has changed our lives forever. Let us share that good news, and let's run with that spirit of love to share with all. Happy Easter. Happy Easter.